You're listening to the Journey Podcast. Do you struggle with the effects of past trauma and feel stuck in your healing journey? Join us today as we hear from a wonderful male guest who shares his perspective on trauma healing and the importance of seeking support. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Journey Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. Overcoming trauma can be a challenging and often overwhelming process, and it is also a powerful opportunity for growth and transformation. In this episode, our guest shares his expertise on how to heal trauma and create a life you love, particularly as it pertains to men's healing journeys. As a life coach specializing in men's trauma healing, our guest offers valuable insights and strategies for building resilience, developing healthy coping mechanisms, and transforming trauma into growth and empowerment. We discuss the unique challenges men face in their healing journeys, as well as the importance of self-awareness and building a support system. David Price has been a certified professional life coach for over 5 years. He's created multiple life-changing coaching programs in which he takes the lessons he's learned in his own journey of overcoming and transformation and helps others do the same. Here is my interview with David Price. Hi, David. It's so great to have you on the podcast. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because overcoming trauma to create a life you love is such an amazing topic for today's episode and for holistic healing in general. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Petra. I really appreciate you having me on, and I'm as excited as you are. I'm really looking forward to getting into this conversation.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And you know what? I'm so glad to have a male perspective on the podcast. So I'm very glad you're here. And for starters, do you want to share a little bit about yourself and your own story?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I'm from America, and I am an only child, my mother and father. And when I was 7 years old, my father had a heart attack while he was at work and passed away at the hospital. And I found out later that day when I got home from my babysitter that my father had died. And it was a terribly traumatic experience. And it just wrecked my world. And I didn't know what to do with it, didn't know what to do about it. And it really was just a very difficult thing for me to deal with. Growing up without a dad, I didn't have anybody to really teach me about sports and fixing cars and that sort of thing that men typically do together and work on together and that kind of thing. And it was very difficult. It really made me feel very inadequate as a man in my roles as a man. I wasn't sure where I fit in or if I fit in among men, and still today struggle with some of that as well. But for a very long time, I allowed the loss of my father to be an excuse for not doing well in my life, for a lot of failure, a lot of mediocrity, a lot of mistakes. And I just constantly used the loss of my father as an excuse for not making of my life what I could have. And I was very miserable. I was about 100 pounds overweight. I hated my life. I hated myself. And even though I had a lot of things going right for me, I could not appreciate them because I was so miserable with who I was and constantly blamed the loss of my dad for that. And so when I got to my lowest point, I reached out to a friend, and this friend really had it together when it came to personal growth and positive mindset and that kind of thing. And I told him I needed help. He recommended a book. That book was The University of Success by Og Mandino. By chapter 2, I was a brand new man. And that book led to lots of other books and coaches and podcasts and courses. And it's just pretty much been an upward trajectory since then as I've learned personal growth knowledge and tools, and my mindset has improved. I live a much more joyful and abundant life, prosperous life today than I ever have because of those personal growth things that I learned and the things that I did. I really love talking about this and I love helping other people experience it. And so I became a certified professional life coach, started my own coaching programs, and now I'm able to help people experience the same wonderful things that I have in my own life.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And what a profound journey you have had, especially with your father passing away. And that must have been very, very difficult at such a young age. And can you talk a little bit about how that trauma showed up in your life? Because I'm curious about whether you think that trauma shows up differently for men and for women.
I'm sure it does. Obviously, from experience, I can only speak for myself. I know that for men, and I've got a program for fathers and husbands who want to be better family men. And it's like, as we would say here in the States, I don't know if this translates to Europe or not, but it's like pulling teeth, we say. It's a very difficult process to get men to open up and admit they need help and receive help. And again, I don't know how that is, Petra, where you are, but certainly here it's very difficult to get men to open up. You know, we're told to kind of push it down. We're told to deal with it and to figure it out. You know, crying is very often looked down on. Being sad, talking about your feelings very often is looked down on. Those things are getting better. I think typically women are more supportive of that kind of thing. Women have been traditionally have been allowed to be more emotional, to be more open with their emotions, but very often men have not. And certainly that was the case with me. I just tried to push it down, tried to ignore it, but it did not work very well. As you know, Petra, it never does.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's one of those things that if you do not take the time to work on it and work it out, it will show up in all sorts of different ways all throughout your life that you might not even be expecting. So, thank you for highlighting your perspective on that because I find that very interesting. And I do agree that it might even be harder for men to take that first step to find help and to ask for help because society just has not really supported that in the last few decades, even. So, yeah, that makes sense. Now, you help other people overcome their trauma and other challenges that they're facing. So, how do you do that? How do you help people when they are on their healing journey?
Well, one thing that I really love about my programs, Petra, is that I don't teach or train in anything that I did not do myself and do not continue to do. And so I really am appreciative, even though my journey was extremely difficult and traumatic. I'm very appreciative that I have a perspective. I know where people are coming from and I know what works. And as I've shared this with hundreds of students and clients throughout my programs, I've seen it work for them as well. So, you know, we begin with taking personal responsibility. That's where it started with me because I was very much in a victim mentality. I felt helpless and hopeless. I thought that something was wrong with me that was keeping me from ever being able to get better, to grow and improve, to be happy. I thought that people who were happy had something that I didn't. I thought that people who were successful had some sort of biological advantage or family advantage or spiritual advantage that I just could never have. And I think a lot of people, Petra, feel that way. I think a lot of us just feel left out. And we feel like that people who are happy are the lucky ones. And if you didn't get lucky, then you're not going to be able to achieve that. But what I learned was that by taking personal responsibility, that doesn't mean you're to blame for anything that happens. It doesn't mean that you're able to perfectly deal with and overcome everything. But as long as we remain in a helpless victim mentality, we have no control over our lives or our happiness or our condition. And it's just a proven fact that the unhappiest people in the world are people who feel like they have no control. They have no sense of agency over their lives. But all of us, Petra, have a degree of control over our mindsets and over the outcomes we experience. And we need to exercise that control to the very maximum degree that we can.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I like the idea of the personal responsibility, even though that can be a challenge all in itself, because coming out of victim mode can mean that you need to look at some things that are very uncomfortable to look at. So, how do you help people overcome some of that resistance that they might have, or some of the fear even that they encounter when they start working with you?
Well, a couple of things in order to get people to kind of see where they are with personal responsibility. We have them answer 4 questions, and those 4 questions are: who do you blame? What are your excuses? What are you complaining about? And what are you waiting for? And so, what that does is sort of, because a lot of people don't really know that they're not taking responsibility. I don't think I knew. I think it was a revelation to me that I wasn't taking responsibility. So sometimes we have to kind of bring people along and show them that maybe they're not taking responsibility. And then once they realize that, we have to sort of walk them through why taking responsibility is actually a positive thing, because it sounds like a very negative thing. It sounds like what we're asking people to do is blame themselves. And in our programs, we don't even use the word blame. Blame to me is an entirely negative mindset. We don't worry about blame. We're not blaming anyone, ourselves included. But it's not negative because you're putting yourself in a position of power. You're putting yourself in a position of being able to meet life's challenges and determine how you want to address them. Jack Canfield teaches what I call the life changing equation. And what he teaches and what I teach is that most people live according to the principle of E equals O. And that means that the event equals the outcome. In other words, for most people, if a quote unquote bad event happens, then it leads to a bad outcome, and there's nothing we can do about that. What Jack Canfield teaches is that the real equation is E plus R equals O, and that means event plus response equals outcome. And so, Pedro, we've all known people who have been perhaps diagnosed with a chronic or terminal illness. And some of those people will just shut down and they'll give up altogether. But other people will take that sort of as a sign that they need to start living, or they need to take more control, or they need to start something that they've been putting off starting. And so, what we see in those cases is that the response that we make to the negative events that happen are part of what creates the outcome that we experience.
I love that. That's such an interesting thing that you're talking about, and the equation also. And I was going to ask you about control, because you did say that most people who are unhappy, they are unhappy because they feel like they have no control. So when people come to you and they say, there's nothing I can do, my job sucks and my life sucks, my wife left me, I'm ill, or things that they feel that they have no control over, that is their situation and they have to live with that. How do you help them see past that and understand that there is some choice and some control, even when it feels like there's not?
Well, it can definitely be a challenge. And the first thing that we do, Petra, is that we talk to people about what can you do, right? So very often there are things that you can do. Sometimes people feel like they're in a situation where there are no options. There's nothing they can do. There's no action that they can take. Very often that's not even the case. Very often you'll say, well, have you had a conversation with this other person? No, it wouldn't do any good. And they'd only get mad. And, so they give you all of these reasons why taking an action won't do any good, or it will only make things worse. So one thing we try to get people to do is to see that very often there are options that they have not made use of. And so we begin with, what can you do to change the situation? Is there any conversation you can have? A lot of people, at times people will say something, well, I can't quit my job. Well, I think a lot of times, Peter, we're way too quick to talk about what we can't do. I mean, is it a fact that you cannot quit your job? You really can't? It's different from saying it would be very challenging to quit my job. Those are two different things. And so sometimes there are options that people have, and we try to get them to see what those options might be. But then if we get into a situation where the person has examined all of those possibilities and we realize that there's really no changing this, the diagnosis is not going to change, the relationship is not going to change. Now the only thing, Peter, that we have left is to work on ourselves. That's all we have. And so we can work on in relationships, for instance, we can work on reducing our exposure to certain people. We can work on the way we deal with certain people. But at the end of the day, the only thing that we really have that under our control is our own mindset. And that's where all of our attention in our programs, that's where all of our attention is focused. Petra, I'm sure you're familiar with Viktor Frankl and his book, Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist. He was Jewish and he was in one of the concentration camps under the Nazis. And Viktor Frankl endured and survived the concentration camps. And after going through that experience, Viktor Frankl said that there's a space between every event and our response. There is a space. And in that space is the last of the human freedoms, the ability to choose your response to every event. And that's such a powerful thing because it's easy for people to look at me. I've lived, really, all things considered, I have lived a very privileged and fairly easy life. I can understand someone dismissing me and as not understanding where they're coming from. But for someone like Viktor Frankl, who had some of the worst tragedy a person can endure, after all of that to say, between every event and your response is a space. And in that space is the last of the human freedoms, the ability to choose your response. That's real. And it's a choice and a freedom that all of us must embrace so that we are making the very best of even very difficult situations.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. And I actually love the book Man's Search for Meaning. I have it here on my desk, funny
How
enough.
about that?
So, and the reason actually why I started reading the book is because I became curious about another thing that Viktor Frankl wrote about. And he said, if you know your why in life, then you can live with almost any how.
Yes.
So basically saying that if we have meaning and we're connected to our purpose, then we can endure almost anything in that life throws at us. So do you incorporate helping people align with their path or with their purpose in your programs as well? And do you find that that helps them with their trauma healing?
We definitely do. And that's such a huge part of what we deal with. We do help people connect with their compelling why, their motivating reason for what they do, why they want to do what they want to do, and where they want to go, and all those things. We have people write out a design for their ideal life, the vision that they have for their life. We have people determine their three core values. We have them write out what they want their life to be, to handwrite it. Petra, I'm sure you would agree that handwriting is such a powerful practice in these things that we do. And then to read that every day and to connect every single day, because in that vision, we have them answer questions like, what do I want to contribute to? What services do I want to provide? Who do I want to be serving and contributing to? Who do I want to be spending my time with? So we help people get in touch with that compelling motivation that they have for the life that they want to create. And I'll tell you, Petra, when we disconnect from that, and here's where so many of us go off the rails, because we disconnect with our compelling, motivating reason why we're doing what we do. We put our heads down, we bury our heads in our businesses, in the day-to-day projects that we have, the housework, the office work, whatever it might be, taking care of the children. We've got our heads down and we're so consumed with day-to-day life that we forget why we're doing all of it to begin with. And I believe this is why so many people get so discouraged and so many people just quit trying altogether.
Yeah, that makes sense to me because it is one of the things that happens to many people is they lose that connection, like you said, to their purpose. And it has all sorts of mental and emotional consequences, even physical consequences for people when they become disconnected like that. So yeah, that's a really, really great point. Going back to the beginning when we talked about asking for help or seeking help, I'm also curious, do you find that sometimes when you work with men in particular that they almost feel like asking for help or working with someone they need help with makes them feel like they're almost inadequate, like you explained in your story, or it makes them feel like less of a man asking for help. Do you find that happens? And how do you address that in your programs?
Well, typically, Patriot, it's interesting. If we can get them into the program, my experience has been that they're very, very open to receiving the help. The challenge is getting them into the program to begin with, as you can imagine. It's interesting that when I do most of my marketing on Facebook, and when I post things on Facebook, almost all of the reactions I get are from women. And so what I'm posting about is men and the challenges of men, but almost all of the reactions are from women. It's like the wives see that the husbands and fathers need the help, but the husbands and fathers aren't seeing it. And so the real challenge is getting them to, first of all, see that there's an issue and then being willing to reach out and ask for help. That's the real. Once they're in the program, Petra, I have been very impressed with how willing they are to listen, to learn, to implement, to be open with me and with each other. But the threshold is getting them in and getting them to really understand that they need help and that it's okay to reach out for it. And really, to be honest with you, Petra, what the answer to that is, I'm not sure. It's really difficult to get men into a program.
Yeah. And I suspect that that will sort of be a global effort, and maybe something that even will take a long time to create these environments where men feel safe and they feel supported and they feel all right to step forward and ask for help. So that might actually take that village,
Yeah,
to put that together. But
I think so.
yeah, it's very interesting. And you did touch a little bit on mindset in the beginning when we talked, and about the victim mindset and how that changes as you start working on yourself and taking responsibility. So, mindset seems to be a really crucial factor in overcoming trauma and healing from trauma. So, how do you address mindset in your programs?
Well, mindset is everything, Petra. And I don't think that's an overstatement. I really do believe that mindset is everything. I believe that what we think and what we say creates the life that we have, it creates the world that we live in. I believe in the statement that nothing has meaning except the meaning that we give it. And by that, I do believe that there are things that are absolutely true. I believe that some things have absolute meaning. But what that means is that whatever happens to you does not have meaning in and of itself. It's not good or bad or anything in and of itself. Everything has meaning, or the only meaning it has is the meaning that you give it. And so if we see things as being negative or bad or disempowering, then that's exactly what they will be. But if we see things as being maybe imparting lessons, or we see them as a blessing, or we see them as something that will strengthen us when we overcome it, our mindset is going to completely change the way that we deal with that. I believe it was Henry Ford, the automobile manufacturer, who said, whether you believe you can or believe you can't, either way, you're right. And I think he was right about that. Our mindset determines everything about us. And so in our programs, pillar 2 of our 4 pillars of personal success, pillar 2 is taking control of our thoughts and actions. Several ways that we do that. One thing, I have an empowering thoughts exercise that I teach that I got from another coach. One thing we teach is affirmations. We teach something very powerful called magic questions that helps train our brains to find solutions. We teach intentional gratitude practices. And we teach something that's very powerful called seek and destroy, which is where we make a list of all the negative or disempowering words that we use, and we just seek to eliminate those from our vocabulary. So words like problem, words like can't, words like terrible, these are some words that we recommend that people just stop using because they're so loaded with negativity. It's almost impossible to overcome the mindset that you put yourself in. If you say something like, well, that's just a horrible problem, I can't figure out a solution for it. I mean, once you've said that, what are you going to do with that issue? There's no solving it. But the way that we think about it and talk about it very much determines how we're going to deal with it.
Yeah. That's a great point. And your program sounds amazing in the way that you address these things and the way you approach them. So, yeah, that sounds fantastic. And just made me think of something when you talked about Henry Ford, because I think he also said that you don't have to have all the answers. You just need to know who to talk to get them. So,
Oh my goodness.
I really hope that for any of the men listening to this podcast today, that they really give themselves permission to be all right, maybe not knowing the answer and asking for help and taking that step forward so that they can heal and they can be happier and healthier. So, yeah, that would be really wonderful.
Relationships are key, Petra, and I know that you would agree with this. That, man, I think I'm 55 years old and I've been doing this personal growth thing. I've been a Christian for a very long time. And I think, Petra, that just now I'm just starting to understand the power of relationships. I just don't think that there's any good thing in life that we can fully have or enjoy or benefit from without some really powerful, positive, and supportive relationships. We need to get more empowering relationships into our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you there. And that does make a huge difference, I think, also in how satisfied we feel with our lives, as whether we have those positive and supportive relationships or not. So, yeah, it's a huge, huge difference, I think, especially if you're embarking on a healing journey for yourself as well. Now, we've talked a little bit about the program that you offer, but do you want to talk about your programs and services that you offer so that listeners could get a feel for how they could connect with you in their healing journey?
Sure, I would love to do that. And I will say, Peter, that in my programs, we've had people from all walks of life, men and women of all ages, who have come in for everything from, I had a client who said she just wanted to be happier. She joined the program because she wasn't as happy as she thought she could be. I had a gentleman that joined. He said, I hate my family and I want to stop hating my family. I've had people who joined for their businesses and entrepreneurs and just all sorts of the wide spectrum of human experiences. But yeah, so I do have two programs right now. One is for men and women. And the program is for either for people who just, they don't know what they want to do. They just kind of lost and aimless and they want to figure out a direction, or for people who know where they want to go, but they've got no idea how to get there. That program is for both men and women. And we help them figure all of that out and give them support in doing that. And then the other group that I mentioned is for husbands and or fathers who know that they're taking their stress and frustration and anger out on their families. They're short-tempered. Maybe they're distant. Maybe they shut down. They don't engage with their families. There's a lot of anger, slamming, throwing things, sarcasm, that sort of thing. And this is very much, Petra, this was me as a husband and a father for a long time, treating my family this way. And then when I began to learn the things that I know now, it just completely transformed me as a husband and father. And now I'm happy to help other men do the same thing. So I do have these two programs. And if anyone would like to connect on either one of those, I would love to chat about that.
That sounds wonderful. And we will be linking to all of David's offerings in the show notes as well. So be sure to check there for the links on how you can get a hold of him, how you can join his programs or talk to him about those programs. And this has been another incredible episode. And I really hope our listeners have enjoyed our journey into overcoming trauma to create a life you love as much as I have. It has been fantastic chatting with you on the podcast, David. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Petra, for having me. I love the work that you do. This is such a wonderful friendship that I feel like I've made, and I'm just so grateful to you for letting me come on and for making this connection. So God bless.
Yeah, thank you. And right back at you. And please continue doing this amazing work that you're doing and highlighting also the opportunities for men to connect and get help if they need it. And I think that's such a wonderful, wonderful thing that you're doing. Thank you so much and take care, David.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Journey podcast, please subscribe, share on social media, and leave us a 5-star review. You can find more of The Journey on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and the Journey blog. Sending you love and courage, and see you next week.